So today we are starting on this story. This is titled Mrs. Yughal Sais. Youghal. Yughal's Sais. Sais. I don't know what the Sais means. This is, let me find out, page 24. Miss Yughal Sais, first published in CMG 25 April 1887 in Plain Tales series. So it starts with this saying. He has written in English, when man and woman are agreed, what can the Qazi do? The correct thing is, Mia Bibi Razi, kya karega Qazi? Mia Bibi Razi is when the husband and wife, man and woman, are agreed. Then what will that Qazi or the religious man do? It's a proverb. This Miss Yughal says, I don't know what that means. Some people say that there is no romance in India. Those people are wrong. Our lives hold quite as much romance as is good for us, sometimes more. Strickland was in the police, and people did not understand him, so they said he was a doubtful sort of man and passed by on the other side. Oh, so they would, if they saw this policeman, Strickland,
Sais is housekeeper in Hindi.
They would go on the other side of the road. Strickland had himself to thank for this. He held the extraordinary theory that a policeman in India should try to know as much about the natives as the natives themselves know. Now, in the whole of Upper India, there is only one man who can pass for Hindu or Mohammedan, hairdresser or priest, or as he pleases. He is feared and respected by the natives from the Ghor Khatri to the Jama Masjid, and he is supposed to have the gift of invisibility and executive control over many devils. But this has done him no good in the eyes of the Indian government. Strickland was foolish enough to take that man for his model, and following out his absurd theory, dabbled in unsavory places which no respectable man would think of exploring, all among the native riffraff. He educated himself in this peculiar way for 7 years, and people could not appreciate it. He was perpetually going fanti among natives, which of course no man with any sense believes in. He was initiated into the Sadbhai at Allahabad once. That is, it was a secret society of seven men. So he was initiated into that secret society once when he was on leave. He knew the lizard song of the South Seas and the Halli Huk dance, which is a religious can-can of a startling kind. When a man knows who danced the Halli Huk and how and when and where, he knows something to be proud of. He has gone deeper than the skin. But Strickland was not proud. Though he had helped once at Jagadhri, at the painting of the Death Bull, which no Englishman must even look upon, and he had mastered the thieves' patter of the Changas, and taken a Isufzai horse thief alone near Attock, and had stood under the sounding board of a border mosque and conducted service in the manner of a Sunni mullah. So this Strickland had done all that. His crowning achievement was spending 11 days as a fakir or priest in the gardens of Baba Atal at Amritsar, and there picking up the threads of the great Nasiban murder case. But people said, mild justly though, why on earth can't Strickland sit in his office and write up his diary and recruit and keep quiet instead of showing up the incapacity of his seniors? So the Nasiban murder case did him no good departmentally, but after his first feeling of wrath, he returned to his outlandish custom of prying into the native life. When a man once acquires a taste for this particular amusement, it abides with him all his days. It is the most fascinating thing in the world. Love not expected. Where other men took 10 days to the hills, Strickland took leave for what he called shikar, put on disguise that appealed to him at that time, stepped down into the brown crowd, and was swallowed up for a while. He was a quiet, dark young fellow, spare, black-eyed, and when he was not thinking of something else, a very interesting companion. Strickland, on native progress as he had seen it, was worth hearing. Natives hated Strickland, but they were afraid of him. He knew too much. When Yugals came into the station, Strickland, very gravely as he did everything, fell in love with Miss Yugal. Oh, so he very seriously fell in love with Miss Yugal. And she, after a while, fell in love with him because she could not understand him. Then Strickland told the parents, but Mrs. Yugal said she was not going to throw her daughter into the worst paid department in the empire. And old Yugal said, in so many words, that he mistrusted Strickland's ways and works and would thank him not to speak or write to his daughter anymore. So the parents were absolutely against it and they banned it. Very well, said Strickland, for he did not wish to make his lady love's life a burden. After one long talk with Miss Yugal, he dropped the business completely. So that is one part of it. Now, the Yugals went up to Shimla in April. In July, Strickland secured 3 months' leave on urgent private affairs. He locked up his house, though not a native in the province would wittingly have touched his house for the world. And he went down to see a friend of his, an old dyer at Taran Taran. Taran Taran is a place, name of a town in the high hills, in the mountains of Himalayas. Here all trace of him was lost until a sage or groom met me on the Simla Mall with this extraordinary note. So he went up into the hills and he was missing. And okay. Until here, all trace of him was lost until a sage or a groom, a horse groom who takes care of the horses, met me on the Shimla Mall with the extraordinary note. Dear old man, Please give bearer a box of cheroots, supers, number one, for preference. They are fresher at the club. I'll repay when reappear, but at present I am out of society. Yours, E. Strickland. So he sent a secret note through his horse groomer, says, to somebody with that note. I ordered 2 boxes and handed them over to the size with my love. That size was Strickland, and he was an old Yogal's employee. He, that size was Strickland, and he was in old Yogal's employ, attached to Miss Yogal's Arab. The poor fellow was suffering for an English smoke, and knew that whatever happened, I should hold my tongue till the business was over. Later on, Mrs. Yogal, who was wrapped up in her servants, began talking at houses where she called of her paragon among sizes, the man who was never too busy to get up in the morning and pick flowers for the breakfast table, and who actually blacked the hoofs of his horse like a London coachman. The turnout of Miss Yogal's Arab was a wonder and a delight. Strickland Dullu, found his reward in the pretty things that Miss Yogal said to him when she went out riding. Her parents were pleased to find she had forgotten all her foolishness for young Strickland and said she was a good girl. Strickland boasts that the 2 months of his service were the most rigid mental discipline he had ever gone through. Quite apart from the little fact that the wife of one of his fellow sizes fell in love with him and then tried to poison him with arsenic because he would have nothing to do with her. He had to school himself into keeping quiet when Miss Yogal went out riding with some man who tried to flirt with her, and he was forced to trot behind carrying the blanket and hearing every word. Also, he had to keep his temper when he was slanged in the theatre porch by a policeman, especially once when he was abused by a Naik he had himself recruited from Isar Jung. Or worse still, when a young subaltern called him a pig for not making way quickly enough. So he had so many aggravations, but he had to bear all that with fortitude and keep quiet because he didn't want to reveal his identity. But the life had its compensations. He obtained great insight into the ways and thefts of sizes, the other horse grooms, how they used to cheat and steal. He learned enough, he says, to have summarily convicted half the population of the Punjab if he had been on business. He became one of the leading players at knuckle bones, which all Jampanies and many sizes play while they are waiting outside the government house of Gaiety Theatre of nights. He learned to smoke tobacco that was 3/4 cow dung, and he heard the wisdom of the grizzled Jemadar of the government house grooms, whose words are valuable. He saw many things which amuse him, and he states on honor that no man can appreciate Shimla properly till he has seen it from the sizes point of view. He also says that if he chose to write all he saw and heard, his head would be broken in several places. Strickland's account of the agony he endured on wet nights, hearing the music and seeing the lights in Benmore, with his toes tingling for a waltz and his head in a horse blanket, is rather amusing. His account is rather amusing. One of these days, Strickland is going to write a little book on his experiences. That book will be worth buying and even more worth suppressing. Thus he served faithfully as Jacob served Rachel. So, in the Bible, Rachel and Jacob. So Jacob served Rachel for many years, I think 14 years, and then he married her. And his leave was nearly at an end when the explosion came. He had really done his best to keep his temper in the hearing of the flirtations I have mentioned, but he broke down at last. An old and very distinguished general took Miss Yogal for a ride and began that specifically offensive, "You're only a little girl" sort of flirtation, most difficult for a woman to turn aside deftly, and most maddening to listen to. Miss Yogal was shaking with fear at the things he said in the hearing of her size, that is, Strickland. Dullu, that is Strickland, that is his call name, Dullu, stood it as long as he could. Then he caught hold of the general's bridle and, in most fluent English, invited him to step off and be flung over the cliff. Next minute, Miss Yogal began to cry, and Strickland saw that he had hopelessly given himself away and everything was over. So once he got so mad with that, what was that officer? General. He got mad with the general for flirting with his girl, and he gave up his identity to take revenge. The general nearly had a fit, while Miss Yogal was sobbing out the story of the disguise and the engagement that was not recognized by the parents. Strickland was furiously angry with himself and more angry with the general for forcing his hand. So he said nothing, but held the horse's head and prepared to thrash the general as some sort of satisfaction. But when the general had thoroughly grasped the story and knew who Strickland was, he began to puff and blow in the saddle and nearly rolled off with laughing. He said Strickland deserved a V.C., Victoria Cross, the highest honor of the British Empire, if it only for putting on a size blanket. Then he called himself names and vowed that he deserved a thrashing, but he was too old to take it from Strickland. Then he complimented Miss Yogal on her lover. The scandal of the business never struck him, for he was a nice old man with a weakness for flirtations. Then he laughed again and said that old Yogal was a fool. Strickland let go of the cob's head and suggested that the general had better help them if that was his opinion. Strickland knew Yogal's weakness for men with titles and letters after their names and high official position. "It's rather like a loft 40 minutes farce," said the general. "But begad, I will help, if it's only to escape that tremendous thrashing I deserve. Go along to your home, my size policeman, and change into decent kit, and I'll attack Mr. Yogal. Miss Yogal, may I ask you to canter home and wait?" So Miss Yogal is asked to go ahead and wait. Go ahead, home ahead and wait. About 7 minutes later, there was a hullabaloo at the club. Big commotion. A size one groom with blanket and head robe was asking all the men he knew, for heaven's sake, lend me decent clothes. So this groom with a blanket and a head rope, that is of the horse, he was asking for decent clothes because he has disguised himself, and now he wants to put on his regular clothes. As the men did not recognize him, there were some peculiar scenes before Strickland could get a hot bath with soda in it in one room, a shirt here, a collar there, a pair of trousers some elsewhere, and so on. So Strickland was this guy, this horse groom, who wanted to change from his clothes of being a groom into his regular policeman clothes. And he was asking, requesting people to please give me this, give me that. So it was some time, the men did not recognize him. There were some peculiar scenes before Strickland could get a hot bath with soda in it. In one room, a shirt in another room, a collar there, a pair of trousers elsewhere, and so on. He galloped off with half the club wardrobe on his back. So he has picked up one thing here, one thing there, and put it all on his back, and he is galloping to the house. Galloped off. And he had taken a stranger's pony, and he was riding on it to the house of old Yugal. The general, arrayed in purple and fine linen, so general, all well dressed up in his regular purple and fine linen, was before him. What the general had said, Strickland never knew. But Yugal received Strickland with moderate civility, and Mrs. Yugal, touched by the devotion of the transformed Dullu, was almost kind. Dullu is the name of the size, that is the horse groom. And Strickland is the same guy when he has removed his disguise. So, the general had told something to them, to Mr. Yugal and Mrs. Yugal, but Strickland did not know that. So Yugal received Strickland with moderate civility, not very effusively, but a bit coldly. And Mrs. Yugal, touched by the devotion of the transformed Dullu, Dullu was very devoted and so well behaved. Mrs. Yugal was absolutely, he was her favorite. And so she was very kind to the transformed Dullu, that is to Strickland. The general beamed and chuckled. Miss Yugal came in, and almost before old Yugal knew where he was, the parental consent had been wrenched out, and Strickland had departed with Miss Yugal to the telegraph office to wire for his European kit. So, in that small little scene, the Mr. Yugal and Mrs. Yugal had so fallen for the scene and the story this general had told them, that they had agreed, okay, Miss Yugal can marry Strickland. And Strickland and Miss Yugal had immediately gone off to the telegraph office to wire for his European kit, to send a telegram to his base to send his European kit. The final embarrassment was when a stranger attacked him on the mall and asked for the stolen pony. Then at the mall, a stranger attacked him and said, "Where is my pony? Why did you steal it?" So it was very embarrassing. In the end, Strickland and Miss Yugal were married. on the strict understanding that Strickland should drop his old ways and stick to the department routine which pays best and leads to Shimla. So he should not do his hanky-panky, all these things. Strickland was far too fond of his wife just then to break his word. But it was a sore trial for him. For the streets and the bazaars, the sounds in them were all full of meaning to Strickland, and these called to him to come back and take up his wanderings and his discoveries. So he loved to play the spy and to sneak around in the bazaars and to learn their local phrases and the calls and behavior. And so, under this agreement for this marriage, he was not to go into the bazaar. He agreed for some time and remained very strict about his police routine. But after some time, he liked it so much he had to go back. Someday I will tell you how he broke his promise to help a friend. That was long since, and he has by this time been nearly spoiled for what he would call shikar. He is forgetting the slang, and the beggar's cant, and the marks, and the signs, and the drift of the undercurrents, which if a man would master, he must always continue to learn. But he fills his department's returns beautifully. So he has to mix with the common people, behave like them, and learn their ways of doing things so that they'll not notice him to be an outsider, so that he can do his spy work amongst the local people. And because he had to marry this girl, he promised he won't do that, and he did keep his promise for quite some time. So that's the end of this story. I hope you liked it. Yes.